On today's episode, Margy and I are excited to be having a conversation with our friend and our client, Bessi Graham. She is an award-winning entrepreneur with over 20 years experience working with business owners, governments, and large funding bodies to bring doing good and making money back together. From the grassroots of sitting in the dirt, working with business owners in the Pacific Islands to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, Bessi has seen it all and brings an unparalleled perspective on what makes change happen. Working with people who have made it but haven't found fulfillment, she helps them put their time, talent, and treasure to work in ways that align with their values and allow them to create a legacy they can be proud of. Bessi teaches people to quiet the noise of the demands and opinions of others and hear their own voice more clearly so they can contribute from a place of authenticity. She removes the frustration and pressure that comes from living someone else's idea of success and replaces it with a sense of flow and fulfillment that can only come when you tap into the fullness of who you are and who you are becoming. Welcome to Monetize the Mic, Bessi.
Thanks, Jess. Lovely to be here.
So, Bessi, we had the honor of getting to meet you recently at Legacy Leaders in Florida, which is Kelly Roach's mastermind for 7- and 8-figure business owners. And it was so cool to meet you because, and I think people can probably relate to this. Sometimes you meet someone and you're just like, the more you talk to them, you're like, wow, this person is legit. Like, there's so much variety in online business owners in terms of business experience. Mm-hmm. And I was really struck in talking to you how much wisdom and how much experience you really bring to business and how much you know. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the show and talk to you, because you just have so much incredible expertise to share. And specifically, what I want to start with is when I've thought about having a business that gives back, it's always felt like a challenge. Like there was this sort of push-pull of I want to give back, right? I want to have this purpose in life and this fulfillment, but I don't want to run a nonprofit, or I don't know if I want to take a big chunk of my profits and donate them to some charity, or like, I don't know if I want to start a fund or start a charity. And I really thought of that is the only way businesses give back, right? You're either in it for yourself and you're selfish and you're, just doing it for the money, or you're donating or starting a fund or something like that. And when I talked to you, I really got that there are so many ways that business owners can have a positive impact in their company. And many of them have nothing to do with donating money to charity or starting a fund. So would you talk about the misconceptions around having an impactful business that gives back and what the actual possibilities are for ways that different types of companies can have a positive impact?
Yeah, sure. And I think, Margy, one of the things that's interesting, whether it's when you meet someone or you read a book, when something really resonates with you and you go, wow, like that's an amazing idea, or I really am drawn to that person, it's because it actually is just stirring up something that you already know to be true. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not new. And so much of this shift in thinking about how we can contribute, or what does it mean to have a meaningful life, or your description of success, is about finding those things where you go, that's true. Like that makes sense to me. And so while it may seem like a big shift or very different to the common way of thinking about success or giving back, it resonates with us because it is something that we deeply already knew in ourselves. And so I think it's worth starting there as a point to sort of say, this isn't something new and scary and completely out there. There is precedent. There is so many stories of people giving back and contributing in this way and using their businesses as a really powerful agent for change in the world that are, as you said, more than just the giving of profit or a donation to charity. And so you're definitely not alone in the thinking process around, okay, if I think about contributing, that is external to my business. So if I'm a business owner or a leader, the sense is, okay, I will wait till I've made enough or we're doing well, and then we'll think about how could we give back? And that becomes back into that aspect of those two options. You have to pick one. So did you start a business and therefore it is about making profit, growth, all of those types of ideas? Or did you go into a nonprofit? Did you start a foundation? Was it about doing good? And when we fall into that trap, in my opinion, we really lose the power of both. So my journey over these sort of 20 plus years has been really grappling with that tension between I studied and was obsessed with leadership, politics, counterterrorism, all that type of stuff. And I knew that there was a role for leadership. I knew that there was a role for government in shifting and changing the world, but I wasn't a natural fit if I had to pick just that. I knew I had a sense of social justice and wanted to contribute, but I didn't fit just in that pure charity type space because I also had a commercial entrepreneurial brain and wanted to actually get out there and make money. And so weaving those things together for me is about shifting that worldview or mindset to say we can actually, if we do the work, so if we challenge ourselves to think differently and actually design our interventions or our businesses or our behavior in a way that brings those worlds back together of doing good and making money, then we can actually create situations where they're mutually reinforcing. They actually make each other better. It's not an either or aspect of having to compromise or say, okay, because I'm trying to make as much money as possible, I will ignore the negative impacts I'm having on the environment, or I will ignore that I'm burning out my staff. And then once we're really profitable, then I'll go out and speak at conferences and be this amazing philanthropist. Like that, to me, is not the way to have that fulfilling life that we're all really looking for.
I love that. And I love that you're talking about team because as I think anyone who listens has probably picked up on, we've become obsessed with like Scrum and Agile and are implementing it in the business. And we spoke to you about it. And then we've both also read and loved the book Multipliers, really focusing on leadership and not just, what can my team do for me, but how can I be the type of leader that brings the best out of people, that makes people really engaged and excited about the type of thinking and problem solving they get to do. How do we create teams where they're not burnt out, where they're able to work together? And by working together and being so agile and being able to pivot, they're also improving profitability and productivity and all of that stuff. So I love what you said about resonance, because it is like, I think part of why we connected was what you do is so much in alignment with the realizations and the learnings that we've had. So I would love to talk more about, and maybe even get kind of more specific case studies or examples from you on how leaders can make that impact in their entire business or specific departments of their business in a way that is furthering their profit and revenue goals, but also, their team and their consumer and the environment.
Sure. So, I think you've already touched on some of those aspects in the examples you gave, because it really does come down to very simple things that if we stop and go, okay, let's pretend we were doing this exercise just as an individual. And we were saying, I want to get to a place where I feel more aligned and connected to how I behave and engage at work. And that looks and feels more like who I am as a person at home or in my personal life. So if we go on that journey for ourselves, we're trying to bring those things back together. If you want to use the cliche, we're trying to bring our whole self to work. That's part of our journey that we're going on as the leader or the owner of the business. So all we have to do is then flip that and say, guess what? If I want that, and if that makes me perform better at work and engage at a higher level and be able to run this business more effectively, chances are that will be the same for my team. If they're able to be in a place where they feel like they bring all of who they are respected and feel that sense of contribution, they will perform better. So with any of these things, again, it's that piece of, we just need to go, if it makes sense here, chances are there's, the fractal nature of it's the same at different levels of a system. And so all we're doing then as a leader or business owner is saying, let me look at my business. And the way I always do it is by looking at where do you spend time and money. So if in your business you spend the bulk of the revenue that's coming in, it flips over, and in the back end, what you're spending that on is staff, and the biggest expense is people, then that's a really good place to start in terms of thinking about how do I do good in the world. So don't, we said at the beginning, we tend to go contribution equals external. So it's about giving away. Well, if we stop for a moment and go, where are we spending the most time and money? How about I begin changing my behavior or thinking processes in that space, then we'll actually see a much bigger shift and impact. And you've seen that and been sharing that publicly about the changes you've seen in your own business as you've taken responsibility for your role as leaders and then done the work to actually put that into play in the business. So as we make that change, it is all of those pieces of saying, okay, what are the elements where my decisions, so the things I have control over, again, try not to push everything out to huge epic issues that you really don't have any of the strings to control. Come back to the decisions you are in control of and that you do make. So how do you pay people? How do you actually employ them? Is there a sense of security in their employment? What are the conditions they work in? How are you then interacting with them in terms of the environment and the culture you create that actually brings them to a place where we often talk about happy Mondays. So how do you get to a place where someone's actually going, yes, it's Monday, rather than going, thank God it's Friday? What does that shift look like in your business? And so that will look different for each of us. So again, I think one of the pieces to always remember, and it's what makes this work interesting, is that there isn't one right answer and one, everyone doesn't have to be passionate about the same things. There's so much diversity of challenges and opportunities out there in the world. I want everyone to be obsessed with and passionate about different things. So you just need to look at that within your organization, and whatever the right culture is, or how you want to make decisions and drive behavior based on your values, that's where you start. If your business spends most of its money, on the people, that would be sort of the response. And probably for the bulk of people that you're working with, it is a people-based approach. And so the decisions really are around that. Just as a quick example for people who may have, say, a product in the mix, and so may have components around actual packaging or shipping things out and that type of business model, then for them, it is more about looking at, okay, so we can't just, again, if contribution is not just external, then we need to look at what is the packaging we're using? What are the supply chains like? How are people treated in the factories where these products are made? So all of those components. And I think having this type of approach to looking at the decisions you have control over, and then being really clear on how to make those in a way that is aligned with your values and what you want to be part of in the world, it makes what would otherwise be massive, overwhelming, huge social issues actually quite doable to have an impact on. Because if each business owner and each leader was making those decisions in really wise ways, then lots of those flow-on effects that become major problems would actually be chipped away at, one business at a time.
That's amazing. I know you talk a lot about mindset, and I would love to dive into the mindset of this because there's a reason that not everybody's doing this, right? It takes a mindset shift. And for me personally, I think I was afraid because there is an aspect of giving up control. When you start looking at creating agile teams, you're empowering the team so much more to make decisions autonomously. And that's such a huge part of why it works. But it can also be scary as a business owner to put your trust in the team and wonder, do they care about this as much as I do because it's my business? And all those fears that can come up when you have to really totally shift the way you think leadership could look. Because for me, I think I came out the gate imitating managers or leaders that I had seen who were not transformational leaders who were leading in an agile way, right? They were
about
leading
strength and control and power. Yeah.
It was about strength and control and power. And so I was imitating that, and it didn't feel good, but I also didn't have the awareness that that's what was making me feel off, right? It was just kind of an all over disalignment.
Yeah.
And then coming into this way of leading and realizing, oh, it's because leading with power and control and hierarchy doesn't feel good. The shift has felt so much better, but I'm also still sitting in this discomfort of I'm not driving and pushing. Now there's a lot more receiving, and that can feel weird. So could you talk about the mindset piece, the mindset that keeps people stuck in these old ways that don't work, and the shift that can create these amazing possibilities?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as people who, when we are business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, whatever the title is you like to sort of put yourself in, the fact is that type of way of engaging in the world is usually coming from the fact that you are someone who likes to make decisions. You have a vision, you're, heading towards something. And so that tendency to lean towards action and jumping in and like, okay, we're usually big picture thinkers, right? So we do like the thinking and the strategizing. But if it was just that, we'd be frustrated, right? We want to jump into, okay, what are we going to do? And one of the shifts that has to occur in terms of a mindset is to say, we need to actually believe, not just say in terms of the cute little slogan that you put on Instagram, but actually believe that the idea of slowing down to speed up is actually important. And a critical first step in that is that the changes we want to see happen in our business will feel more natural and aligned and be easier to implement if we have first done the work on ourselves as an individual. So not just jumping straight into, okay, agile is the thing, and so we need to start to behave in a different way and have different practices and rituals as an organization. But to first say, some of that feeling or discomfort or disquiet that you talked about, that is going to be natural as I shift into a sense of saying, I will give you ownership or decision-making rights in components of how this business runs. And with that, I recognize that I don't know exactly how you're going to do it, and it will very likely be different to how I would actually do it. And if we're honest about that discomfort, then we need to rewind a bit and we need to say, okay, what would be some of the foundational pieces that would help soften the edges of that, and also, and more importantly, help increase the chance that the team will actually be trending in the direction of where we want to go, like that will be a shared sense of vision or outcome that we're all driving towards. And the quickest, best way to do that is for you to be really clear on both your own values and the vision that you have, but also for the business itself. Like, what are our values? And I don't mean that. Usually when people talk about values or say, let's have a session and discuss our core values, we all throw up in our mouth a little bit because it's like, okay, this is going to be boring and ridiculous. And we'll have eagles on the wall talking about, integrity and wisdom and, oh gosh, all these beautiful words that end up meaning nothing. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about values in the sense of really strong reflections of who we actually are, how we behave, how we make decisions. If those things are clear, then making big decisions, being decisive as a leader, it all naturally flows from that place of awareness. So that shift to say, I need to own my own journey, and my role as the leader and be really clear is important. And it comes back to another book that I read last year, which I'm pretty sure you've read too, Who Not How. And when I read that book, what I found really interesting was how much I realized often I have a really clear vision and a sense of things, but it's intuitive to me and I think it's obvious. And so I think, well, of course you get it. Like, why would I have to communicate to you that this is what we're doing? And that's lazy. And so as a leader, it's that piece of saying, we want things to operate and we're drawn to some of these ideas, whether it's agile or different things, because we see the power of what that could unlock in our team. But unless we do our part, it doesn't work. And so that first shift is to say, your desire to jump to action and to the movement of the business being more effective and growing or scaling or whatever it is that's important to you will be greatly impacted by the part that you play and that shift that you make yourself. So that would be the first big shift that needs to occur, is actually we need to do our work and not just push what the business needs to do or our team needs to step up. It's actually us as leaders. The other aspects that really come into just thinking about this bigger sense of what doing good could look like and how we contribute in the world does come back to sitting with, and again, it's starting to reflect on whether sometimes it's a conscious aspect that we actually have a belief that we are uncomfortable with, or that money is actually something to be ashamed of. For some people, there is genuine discomfort with wealth or creating profit in a business, and they do feel like, oh, now I must show that I'm generous and still a decent person by doing these outward things, because otherwise I will be judged. So sometimes there's a real conscious aspect of beliefs that are there that you need to deal with. But for a lot of people, particularly those who see themselves as more innovative, groundbreaking type leaders, it's actually a more difficult transition because they will say the right thing. So they'll say, of course you should do good and make money. For sure we need to bring those things back together and think differently and come at the world in this way that actually we both reinforce each other. And yet if it's an unconscious sense of when it actually gets to the decision, there is still some sense where they go, well, but really at the end of the day, I set up a business. I didn't set up a charity. Like, that's something I'll do later. Why would I be taking these things into consideration? Because paying those staff more will drop my profit, or actually thinking about the way we package that product is going to increase the costs of that. And that's not really why I did it. So when it comes down to the actual decision, if you haven't grappled with really what's driving your thinking and behavior, then you will fall back into that pattern we talked about right at the beginning of thinking, okay, well, this was the decision I made. I am a business owner. I'm not the CEO of a charity, so I need to behave how CEOs behave. So in both of those cases, interestingly, it's always about us, isn't it? It's always about the work as an individual.
One thing that I see a lot with entrepreneurs when they have a service that really helps people, maybe they're, a coach who's kind of working with people in an area of their personal life, not necessarily their business, or perhaps they have a business coaching company for people that are just starting out. They struggle with pricing because they feel like they know their service really helps people, but they feel like if they price it at a rate where they'll be able to grow and be profitable, they'll be leaving people behind who can't afford it. So I would love for you to share your thoughts there, because it's an area where I see a lot of people really struggling with, like, having to choose between helping people and also their own financial, stability.
My response to that comes down to often, in the work we do, it's about paradoxes or things that seem like contradictions, right? So you go, oh, but hang on, you just said doing good and making money, and now you're saying there's trade-offs or constraints, right? So which one is it? And the tricky reality in life is that it's both of those things. Like, both things are equally true. So my answer is that when we are then looking at our business model, and in my mind, I naturally see straight away the business model canvas, because that's a framework that we always use with people. So if people are familiar with this, you will probably be like me, picturing a canvas right now in your head. If you're not familiar with the business model, basically the way that I think about this is that when you're thinking of your business, you need to think, okay, what is the main driver here in terms of, if we go to that question of how do I do the most good, or what does my contribution look like as a business? If there is a fundamental focus on a particular group who you see yourself as serving, and for them the biggest challenge to interact with you is going to be around price point, then you need to make very different decisions about how you operate and build the business in that back end, so that your cost structures actually reflect an ability to have a low price point. Because one of the challenges that we have is when we want to do all of those things at the same time. So we say, I'm going to have this really expensive back end and incredibly difficult or complicated business to run. That actually means it needs a high price point, but my customers are all going to be people who can only pay a low price point. That's where we get back into the trap that every charity or nonprofit that doesn't have a sustainable business model is in, because they're saying, I need to provide this service that costs $80 per person, but they can only pay $5 per person. So we will never have a business model, and we need donations forever. And it's like, end of conversation. What we need to do, and there's an amazing group in Bangladesh, the biggest not-for-profit in the world, and they have a whole social enterprise team. So a team where they're running businesses that have a social purpose. And they always, on each business they set up, they identify where, in their context, they talk about the poor. In different cultures that would be appropriate or not, but where the beneficiary group or those they're trying to serve sits. And when that beneficiary sits as a customer, then their business that they run tends to be more automated and a lower price point in the back end, so they can serve them. When that beneficiary group, so say, for example, when they're making clothing and they're hiring incredible artisans, these women who make the most beautiful clothes, they say, okay, we need to be able to pay those women, sit in the back end of producing our product, which means we cannot have a low price point. So we can't also be trying to target poor families who could not pay for that service. So in that instance, they run a business where they target the wealthy in Bangladesh and people buying clothing for weddings, and the prices are incredibly expensive to pay properly the women that are producing. So I think my first response comes down to how we design our business in the first place. So if our driver is to have a low price point, and that's it, then we have to run a different business to be able to sustain that without putting that pressure on us that it doesn't stack up. If we go back to the types of businesses that most of us work with, where there is that sense of you want to contribute, you do want people to have access to your services, but it's not necessarily that they are the only or the primary end user of that product, then it's about thinking of different ways that might play out for your business. So sometimes it's about having a number of different customers that between them make the numbers stack up in your business. So it might be that you actually have some people who are buying at a different price point or a slightly different product that is at a cheaper price point. Then you may have others who you have a higher end service and you unapologetically charge what that is worth, and it draws certain customers. And then, like yourselves, you can actually have a whole bunch of stuff that's free and out there in the world, whether that's a podcast, whether that is a blog or different components that you're sharing online for free. And you can say, I want to make sure that there's a base level of what I have to give in the world that is available either free or at a lower price point, but not then feel I need to apologize for those aspects of the business that are charged at a higher rate. And the final thing, Jess, that I would say is there's also often a place for either subsidizing, whether that's yourself as an organization through some scholarships or partial, reductions of pricing, or even going out and having other foundations or philanthropists put in for something. If what you're delivering is really needed for a cohort that cannot afford it, there is nothing wrong with going to a local foundation and saying, you work in the area of domestic violence and helping women who are escaping from those situations, and our services really support them to find a new job. We would love to be able to offer that to some of your clients. Is there an agreement we can come up with? And maybe that foundation will pay half of their costs. So it's about really stepping back and going, what am I trying to achieve? What's the best way to do it? What is fair? Because we also know people don't value what they don't pay for. And even in a context, I've worked a lot in developing countries. You have to put the price point at an appropriate level, but people will engage better, look after that product that they've bought from you if there has been a transaction, and that doesn't always have to be money, but you do need to think about what does that look like in your business, and not feel that your only option of being a generous, decent human is to give everything away for free.
That's so good. And I love that you touched on content, because free content is so incredible. And I was actually working with someone who was talking to me about how she really wants to have this incredible impact on humanity, right? Not just on a handful of clients who can afford to work with her at this really high touch level. And my first question was, well, are you putting out life-changing content? Every time you do a post or a podcast, is it life-changing? Can the people who hear it get something from it? And I really love that shift, because not only does it obviously position you and help your brand tremendously when everything you're putting out is actually high quality, it will stand out because so many people are just going for volume with content.
Yes.
When you go for quality, you stand out, right? So those high ticket clients, if you're a business that works with high ticket people, that's going to help to earn trust and get them to convert into clients. But the content can also stand alone as valuable. And that is something where you can have a global impact and help people who don't have any money to invest in it right now.
Exactly.
So I love that you talk about that. And we're so passionate about people sharing value and sharing their story on podcasts, because even listeners who will never become your client get something from you. And that is so powerful.
Agreed. And I think it's that aspect too of recognizing again that contribution and change happens at all levels. So it doesn't have to be at that level of someone didn't have drinking water and now because of you they do. It doesn't. So if it is at that level of really fundamental things, that's great if that's the area that your brilliance comes out in the world. But as you said, you could speak on a podcast and you could share an aspect of your story that someone goes home and starts to talk to their partner differently, or engage with their children differently, or just it drops a level of resentment out of them because they've now seen the world in a different way. That majorly impacts how those children are raised in that house or the quality of that relationship. And that has flow-on effects. And what a beautiful thing, like whatever level it happens at, influencing more of that positive change in the world, that's exciting.
So Bessi, who do you serve and help? Because I want our listeners to reach out to you, and who is the best type of listener to reach out and connect with you, and how can they do so?
Sure. So I think, Jess, really similar to what Margy was saying right at the beginning of the conversation, the types of people that I work with are those who have had that realization that they could be engaging differently. So it's that either just seen a little glimmer of that or had the full-on epiphany of, oh my goodness, I could do this completely differently. And so those looking from the outside in at you and your life would probably say that you've made it. So you look successful, you look like you've got it all going on, the business is going well, you're doing well, but there's still that sense of this doesn't feel like it's meaningful or fulfilling. And so if that feeling for you that there is something more, that you do want to contribute in broader ways, but you need to be able to come back to some of those things we've talked about today of really going, no, I need to better understand those driving values and behaviors for me as an individual to be able to picture what that vision is and then drive the organization in that direction. Then they're the types of people that it would be great to jump on the phone or on a Zoom and have a chat with, because exploring how we best do that for you and how we unpack those values and move into the components that actually help you be in alignment with yourself as a leader and a business owner is what I love to do. And then the strategy and all of those pieces, like I said, they actually flow much more easily once this work has been done. So if people wanted to reach out, either on Instagram or Facebook is the best option, and just Bessi Graham is how you would find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was such an amazing conversation, and I know it brought us so much value, and I know it'll bring our listeners value as well. So thank you so much.
I'm so glad. Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bessi.